Imagine walking around inside a building for 7 hours looking just like everybody else. Imagine only being able to wear a few colors, but you can't choose them. Imagine doing this for 5 days a week, 180 days a year, and for 13 to 17 years straight. This is what happens when schools require school uniforms. That doesn't sound ideal for anybody to have to go through or do. Schools all around the world have been debating school uniforms for decades. As stated by Chris Carson, in the 16th century, England was the first nation to require school uniforms. I became interested in this topic as a freshman in high school, as my principal and I were having a conversation, and he asked me, how would you feel if our district would go through this and switch uniforms? I was thrown off guard, but I immediately said I hadn't thought about it enough. That is when I went home and immediately started researching for hours and hours and hours about everything you could think of that has to do with school uniforms. This is where I have come to the conclusion that school uniforms cause more negative than positive events. So I'm here today to encourage all of you to not support schools in choosing school uniforms because they add large expenses to families, they don't help dress code problems that already exist, and they hurt students' individuality. I'll start by explaining how school uniforms add a very large expense that many families struggle to afford. 1 in 5 children go without an item of clothing because their parents are unable to meet the costs. Stated Polly Curtis in the article, Parents Unable to Afford Uniforms. If schools were to make uniforms mandatory, then what are these parents supposed to do? If they send their child to school, then the child gets in trouble for not following the uniform rules. But if the parent chooses to keep the school at home, then they lack attendance and academic performance. This is a major lose-lose situation for parents who already financially struggle. Not all parents struggle, but those who are capable of affording regular clothes may run into some issues because of the uniform costing so much more than regular clothes. Scott Miller showed in his article, How Much Do School Uniforms Cost? The standardized clothing costs $25 to $200 per outfit, but uniforms cost $100 to $500 per outfit. These prices are more than double. Now imagine if a parent spends at least the least amount possible. With standardized clothing, they will spend $125 for a week worth of clothing. But with uniforms, they can spend $500 for a week worth. This is 4 times the amount of money. Or what if a student is having to pay for themselves and then they have to pay other expenses for education and everyday life experiences? Prices for uniforms are very expensive, and it's unfair to parents and students to have to spend more just to dress a certain way. Not everyone can do that. Schools aren't considering that school is a place for education and not for what you look or dress like. Lastly, if school uniforms are required, then families have to buy all new clothes along with keeping up with buying regular school clothes. Kids will still, even with uniforms, have to wear regular clothes after school, on the weekends, to church, to work, for school, and many other extracurricular activities that students of all ages take place in. Now that I have explained to you that the expenses are not worth the transition, I'm going to discuss the amount of dress code rules that are needed for both regular school clothes and uniforms. Dress codes are set in place for schools no matter if they have to require a uniform or not. Dress codes are not perfectly worded, and students find a way to manipulate what they want to wear because they love them. For example, my high school didn't like super skinny tank top straps, and they had to be 2 inches thick. A classmate of mine told me that she had bent the dress code rules once. All she had was a 1-inch thick tank top. She had just gotten the shirt, and she wanted to wear it knowing that it was going to be super hot the next day. She had never gotten in trouble for clothing or anything of that sort before, but she decided to risk it knowing she was still appropriate and wasn't too far from the rule. This is showing that if students want to break the dress code rules, they are going to, and school uniforms aren't going to stop them. Clothing is clothing, and my high school has had a school policy that required uniforms. My classmate would still choose to wear that tank top, the results would be the same. No matter if the rule was a standard dress code or uniform, she chose it doing and knowing the rules were there beforehand. Implementing school uniforms isn't going to take the dress code away. In the book, The Challenges of Mandating School Uniforms in Public Schools, author Todd DeMitchell explains throughout the book, with uniforms, dress codes are still going to be able to be set in place, but worded differently to fit the dress requirements. He further talks about if schools are having issues with dress codes, adding uniforms aren't going to fix the problem. He then states, it's more beneficial to keep current dress codes rather than fighting students and parents to switch and force the student body to wear specific articles of clothing. With schools having certain dress codes in place, already switching to school uniforms is going to require them to change their dress codes completely. If they felt the need to change them, they could fix the current dress codes and come out more successful than fighting against a worldwide debate that no one has agreed upon. Since you've learned how expensive uniforms can be and how dress code problems wouldn't be solved this way, let's move on to how it takes away from students' individuality. People think that uniforms are going to eliminate all problems between the students because they are all wearing similar outfits. This is not the case because a student acts isn't going to change just because a school made a new rule about clothing. In the book Student Manifesto, author T.P. O'Neill explains that being able to choose a style of clothing allows students to avoid bullying and gain self-confidence. When students get judged or made fun of, the easiest thing to point out is inanimate objects such as clothing. So many people think that mandating uniforms will fix that. That isn't the case though, because bullies will just resort to more physical and more detailed things about that child. When an individual chooses what clothing to wear each day, they get to pick and choose whatever they want to express themselves, make them feel confident and just happy with how they look. For example, clothing has always been a very major thing for me. I had to always match head to toe, and depending on how I felt that morning would determine how I wanted to look and how I wanted to express myself. So, one option, if I wanted to be more girly, stylish, I would choose a dress or a nice shirt, such as this one, in the sense of wanting to express more of like my girly personality. But then I was always raised as a tomboy, and I began racing and all that. So deep down inside, some days I'd be like, oh, I don't want to wear anything. So I'd choose a casual hoodie. Both of these things represent me very, very well, but just being able to choose a simple change in top or outfit would allow me to express myself of who I am both ways. When you take that away, it causes their self-confidence and expression to decrease because someone else chooses what they would wear rather than themselves. Many people hold in feelings, and if you look and pay attention to how they dress, act, and talk, you can figure a lot out about that person. And if you dress that way they wish to an extent, then most people aren't going to fully be themselves. Another factor that goes into students choosing their clothes is that it gives them the opportunity to express their character and gain more responsibility. Wearing the same colors and styles every day as everyone else around you doesn't allow you to express themselves differently. In an HHS article titled Uniforms Limit Individuality, author and data gatherer Lori Rodriguez states, having a uniform would remove a layer of responsibility from students. An individual chooses many different things in life, allows for them to gain responsibility through learning and knowing what is right and wrong, or good and bad. Putting on clothes in the morning is something people take for granted as an easy task. People don't think about all that goes into it. When putting clothes on, you think about matching clothes, matching colors, the weather, what fits you, what doesn't, what's good with your hair, what's good with your shoes. Everybody has their own way of thinking. So having a school choose one outfit for hundreds of children is impossible for everyone to be themselves. In conclusion, school uniforms should be implemented in schools because it will affect the way students feel while being in school and not fix any other problems that the schools may have been facing with clothing control. The whole reason that school is important is so that students can get a reasonable education without distractions. Schools nowadays worry so much about changing how the school runs entirely without even taking into consideration that there wasn't an issue beforehand. If schools would just let things that aren't directed to academics and education go, such as uniforms, then everyone's lives would be fully focused on education in the school environment. Schools that don't mandate school uniforms are going to keep costs low, manageable for families and individuals, keep dress code plans open and appropriate for everyone, and allow the students to express and learn who they are through choosing between the articles that they like. So don't encourage schools to mandate uniforms and take those things away from everybody.